Fall, fall into night. Fall, fall into fright. Man gives his all, and yet in vain. What more can one do in such helpless pain? New beginnings, promises abound. Yet evil is not far, nor is it bound. On this mountain, Chapter 3. There are some things you will never forget. You can live a million memories without paying attention, and yet have specific images of those memories burned into your mind. Here was a moment, an image, I would never forget. My throat burned, and my eyes streamed with water as I peered through the smoke. The west gate and the surrounding dwellings were engulfed in wrath-filled flames. Chaos had erupted in the streets. Screams and cries for help haunted my ears as I saw the enemy break through the gate, meeting our final defense. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the hilt of the sword, which was now strapped at my waist. Alenia and I had climbed out of the window of the third floor onto the roof of Quimby's tavern to watch. "This is the largest attack from the marauders I've ever seen," Alenia said. "We can't just sit here all day while Haven loses ground." I heard her words, but they never landed. I was entranced by the flames. The more I looked at this horrific scene, the more the dull weight in my chest grew. The more I surveyed the terror, the more I could understand this weight, this guilt. "Edmund?" Alenia said. I came to my senses. "Sorry." "We have to do something," she said. I nodded and looked at my bandages and felt my ankle complain. "But what can we even do?" A crack echoed down the street, and then another and another. We looked to see a horse-drawn wagon come barreling down the street. Its cumbersome wooden wheels came to a jolting stop as the driver pulled the reins on his horse, stopping the cart just in front of the tavern. He was fully armored and with an engraved symbol of an ornate crown on his shoulder. He clambered out of the wagon and then removed his helmet. The crow's feet around his aged eyes were visible, even from Alenia and I's perch. "Alenia! Alenia!" he shouted. Alenia waved her hands. "Up here, Benjamin! What brings you to Tiller's Tavern at a time like this?" His posture lowered. "Well, I have some bad news for you, Alenia. It seems we haven't much time. You need to come with me to the North Gate. It's your brother." I looked over at Alenia. Her lips tightened and her eyebrows narrowed. She whispered, "I knew this day would come. Of all days, why today?" She stood and shouted, "Thank you, Benjamin! I'll be down quickly." Both of us climbed back down into my room and ran down the stairs into the great hall. After removing 2 large tables, we opened the door to find Benjamin and his wagon waiting and ready. Alenia stopped me at the door. "Edmund," she said, "you need to stay here." A building down the street crashed in flames. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I made a promise to Quimby that I would protect you." "Edmund, this is different," she said. "I must go alone." Benjamin cleared his throat. "My lady, we don't have much time. We have to get back." "Edmund," she said, "if you want to keep Haven safe, then you must listen to me. I have to go alone." I walked over to the wagon. "I'm not leaving you," I said. She was exasperated, but before she could speak, Benjamin interrupted. "Alenia, I don't want to waste any more time. Let the young man come along, and I'll make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. All right? Alenia looked displeased, but gave Benjamin a slight nod and then climbed into the wagon. The loud crack of Benjamin's whip brought the horse to a full gallop down the street. The cobblestone made for a smooth ride, but the city was much larger than I had anticipated. Houses of cut stone and rough lumber filled the scene, yet the streets were unpopulated, as many hid from the attack. Eventually, we crossed an enormous wooden bridge, stretching the span of a dark blue river, full of docks and boats. Benjamin took a hard left after the bridge, causing the wagon to drift and bounce as it tried to correct its direction behind the horse. Alenia was silent during the entire ride, her vision fixed toward the front of the wagon. I wanted to say something, but I could tell that both of them were not in the mood for conversation. The wagon continued recklessly to its destination, and I could feel Alenia's presence, and it was full of fear. The sun came to a full set, and nightfall had come as we arrived at the northern gate. The gate was identical to the western one. Its large wooden planks, held together by iron supports, stood at least 2 stories tall. The top corners of the gate were each married to a parapet that kept watch. The cart came to a jolting stop, and immediately Alenia began to make her way to the small man door in the hall of the gate. I followed behind. "Far enough, Edmund," she said as she worked the latch on the door. "I'm going with you," I said. "I'm not breaking my promise." She spun on her heels towards me. "You're a fool, Edmund," she said. "Quimby would leave me as well. This was our arrangement." Tears stained her cheeks. That once chilling stare was now faded and weary. Benjamin put his hand on my shoulder. "Son," he said, "this is not our fight, not our problem. We can't compromise the safety of Haven for this." I felt fire burning in my chest. "Why won't you tell me what's going on here?" My shout threw them both off for just a second, just long enough for me to quickly sidestep past them and sprint out the man door of the gate. "Edmund, you fool!" Alenia shouted, but it was too late. I stormed out the door and was immediately met by a haunting chill that ran down my spine. It was dark, so dark that what was most likely a beautiful view was now pitch black in the cloudy night. A man stood just 10 paces in front of me. His features were concealed under a shimmering cloak. He held a small torch that cast dancing light off his face, but not enough to truly tell his countenance. From the shadowed man echoed a voice. My, this is truly a surprise. Alenia would have never been so foolish to send a young boy to his death, right?" Alenia stepped out from behind me. "Desmond," she said, "your dealings are with me. Leave him out of this." The man chuckled. "Good. We wouldn't want to spill unnecessary blood. I mean, more than we have already today." Alenia moved to stand between me and him. "I'm ready. You found me. Just take me, get this over with, and leave Haven alone." The man let out a hearty laugh. "You think I would leave a little gem of a place like this alone?" He pointed up at the top of the gate. "Look, you see. This place is following the filth of the king." I turned to see a flag blowing in the night wind. There was enough torchlight on the wall to make out the symbol of an ornate crown on the flag. The words on the bottom were unreadable. Alenia's posture grew. "So what does it matter to you? You have me now. Just take me and get this over with." The man took a step closer. I felt my hand reach for the sword at my waist. "Listen," he said. You've been running for years. You know how this goes. This place, like every little hiding place of yours, will burn." I looked at Alenia. More tears streamed down her face. "It was you, wasn't it?" she cried. Desmond sneered. "All that matters is that you understand what fate will befall this place because of you." He reached out his hand. "I'm giving you a chance, sister. Come with me peacefully, and maybe I'll let this boy live for well, at least another week." Alenia's soft crying didn't stop as she began to walk towards the man. A devilish chuckle echoed from his cloak. My face grew red hot. "Enough!" I cried and drew my sword. I had both hands on the hilt, pointing the blade at him. It was the first time I had drawn the old sword. On its place above the great hearth, it looked nothing more than an old antique, retired for decoration. But now I saw that despite it having a rusty scabbard, the blade itself was clean. The moon peeked through a part in the clouds, and the blade glowed in the moonlight. Alenia whispered behind me, "Edmund, you can't fight him. He will kill you." I knew she was right, but I couldn't help notice Desmond's now visible expression. His eyebrows were wrinkled, and his thin face grew long as he looked over the blade from where he stood. He took a step back and spoke, but his voice was noticeably shaken. Where did you get that blade?" he said. I took a step forward and flourished the blade in an attempt to intimidate him. He took one step back, but only to reveal a lengthy and treacherous blade of his own. "Do you wish to die, boy?" he said. "No man has laid a scratch on me." I glared as deeply as I could into his eyes. "So," I said, "Haven's blood is on your hands?" He laughed. "Just you wait until you hear every last scream when the city is burned." I didn't care if I died. I charged him, swinging as hard and fast as I could, trying not to let him swing back. I gained ground as he backpedaled and blocked my blows. I was clumsy, and even though the blade felt right in my hand, I didn't know what I was doing. I kept flailing wildly until he broke one of my swings with a well-timed parry and was able to smash my shoulder with the hilt of his sword. I fell to the ground with jolting pain running through my back. It felt familiar, and in that familiarity, boldness returned. I was suddenly on my feet, my hands gripped tight around the sword, and ancient instinct took over. One swing after another, something returned, a sense of freedom, like when you finally remember an old song that you used to play on guitar. This song, though, was a flurry of blows, and though Desmond was keeping up with my furious pace, I was able to open his defenses and knock him to the ground with my shoulder. To my surprise, he laid there, and for just a second I saw the unmistakable look in his eyes. Fear. His hand was pressed against his face, and blood seeped between his fingers. He moved his hand to look at the blood, revealing a large gash on the side of his face. I got him. His once fearful expression turned to rage as he signaled in the air with his outstretched, blood-soaked hand. The signal fell, and I was immediately met with searing anguish. I was on the ground, with multiple projectiles stuck in my body. I tried to scream, but felt that my chest couldn't. My ears were pierced by the horrifying screams of Alenia. In my fading vision, I could see multiple cloaked men. Alenia tried to put up a fight, but there were too many of them. As they disappeared with her into the darkness, cold crept over my body, my vision faded, and I fell into darkness. I awoke from my dark sleep to find myself in the same monotonous scenery of my last few days. Scratchy quilts, a creaky bed, a rocking chair, and a fireplace greeted me warmly, whether I liked it or not. The old sword, broken crossguard and all, was leaning against the stone of the hearth. The familiar faces of Quimby and Benjamin stood in the threshold, talking in a hushed tone. I sat up in my bed and was met with more bandages and more pain. Quimby stepped into the room. His kind disposition was gone, and now I just felt cold in his presence. "You're a fool," he said. "I'm angry at myself for leaving Alenia in your incompetent care, and I'm upset you meddled in things that are not yours to meddle with." Immense guilt washed over me. The dull weight in my chest came back in full strength. I took a breath to talk, but he continued. "But frankly, I can't fault you for trying to kill that snake Desmond." "Quimby," I said, "where is Alenia? What happened to her?" His fist tightened, whitening his knuckles. "She's gone," he said, with a slight quiver, "and I would give anything to have her back." I felt my face warm with tears and looked up to see Quimby's eyes watering as well. "Quimby," I said, "she knew my name. It's Edmund." A smirk came across Quimby's face. "That's my Alenia." We sat for a time in silence. The fire cracked a few logs, and plumes of smoke floated into the ceiling as Benjamin had taken a seat in the rocking chair with his pipe. Quimby sat at my bedside. "We don't have much time now," he said. "There was nothing we could do at this time to save Alenia. We have a lot of work to do and a long journey ahead of us." Quimby stood and walked over to the hearth. "Edmund is a good name," he said. "Do you know what it means?" I shook my head. He picked up the old sword, its blade still brightly shimmering in the firelight, aside from the one small stain of blood on the tip of the blade. He rested the hilt in my hand. "It means protector, prosperous protector."